I'm just looking over to the side here and checking out the table because I was busily working on the computer when I could have been grabbing all of the material that I'm going to be talking about. You will only notice what we do in here if you take a look at some of the videos that we post following most shows. Not all shows, but following most shows. I have quite a bit going on today. I believe in the next hour, Grant Loebs is going to be joining us. Of course, he's the Twin Falls County prosecutor. Spends a few minutes with us about once a month and talks about some various legal issues. And we've already kicked around some ideas for today. Although there is one aspect that we probably haven't gone into too much detail, and that is that tonight is called Amateur Night by many people in law enforcement. And from the prosecutor's standpoint, he has met many of those amateurs. So he may have some thoughts about that coming up a little later in the program. Steve Millington is going to drop by in about 20 minutes. He is the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party. A lot to talk about. First of all, session coming near an end, maybe, legislative session in Boise. And he's going to have some opportunity to speak with us about that. And also, a man that he knows very well, and that is our congressman in the Twin Falls area, Mike Simpson, on Sunday, took to the newspapers across the state, denouncing Tea Partiers and conservatives, who he says are making life miserable for their fellow Republicans in the House and Senate in Washington. So Steve may have some thoughts about that as well coming up a little later. The big story right now, I don't know if it's still at the lead, at the top of the Drudge Facebook page, or rather the Drudge internet page. But if you actually look at that periodically, Matt Drudge will update headlines a couple of times a day. But the big headline at the top left-hand corner today involves an event that happened right here in the state of Idaho. Now, just Thursday, maybe last week, we were talking with a representative from Idaho Fish and Game. We were in studio, and we had a brief reference of snow geese because I don't know if you've ever seen them when they congregate in one particular spot. Sometimes it seems there's 100,000 geese that are filling a field somewhere, and of course they leave all sorts of droppings behind. This time, they're dropping out of the sky, and it happened in northern Idaho. This comes from NBC's website. Avian cholera suspected after 2,000 geese found dead in Idaho. Some years ago, there was a massive bird die-off. What was it, in Missouri? And there were rumors on the internet at the time that someone had been working on certain chemical warfare projects out of the Pentagon. And then shortly thereafter, the former West Point graduate, Jack Wheeler, who had been working in the Pentagon as well as doing some research, secret research, was found dead in a dumpster. In fact, I think he was somebody at a landfill saw his body being dumped out of a garbage truck. And there had always been speculation that Jack Wheeler had known what had happened and that there was something sinister going on there and that someone had decided to get rid of him and didn't do a very good job of getting rid of the man. That was one of those conspiracy theories that went all over the internet for about a month, and then it died down, and people have really forgotten about his story. He was featured in a book about West Point graduates back in the 1960s before he went off and served in Vietnam. So he was a rather legendary figure when it came to the military. However, I don't think we're looking at anything quite so sinister, and I don't know that anything quite so sinister happened then, but this story from NBC says about 2,000 migrating snow geese were found dead in northern Idaho over the weekend. That comes from state wildlife officials, and Monday they said that it was likely avian cholera. The state fish and game department said the geese appeared to have died while stopping at the Mud Lake and Market Lake wildlife management areas on their way home to their nesting grounds in northern Alaska. While testing is not complete, the apparent symptoms indicate avian cholera, the agency said, and the carcasses are going to be incinerated so other scavenging birds don't eat going down and chewing on them might leave you with the same thing. In fact, there are some bald eagles in the area, and there's some concern that the bald eagles have already been feasting on the dead snow geese. Steve Schmidt, supervisor of the agency's Upper Snake region, said it wasn't known how the birds contracted the disease, but he said their migration would have started in the southwest and Mexico. Outbreaks of avian cholera, which federal health officials said poses little risk to people, have occurred sporadically in the northwest region over the last few years. More than 10,000 migrating birds died of avian cholera in southern Oregon and northern California in the first 3 months of 2012 because of low water levels in wetlands and a popular bird rest area. So there you have it. Apparently, they may have picked up the cholera somewhere in the southwestern region, New Mexico, Arizona, or even Mexico. And by the time they got over northern Idaho, they were having some GI issues. Not that that's ever happened to a snow goose before, but they started dropping out of the sky. 2,000 of them just came falling down. And if the one in the lead obviously is falling first, the others are going to be falling sick or not. But here you go. You've got a serious cleanup problem taking place. And likely this will get some attention for a day, and then it will be forgotten. But as I say, when you see it leading the Drudge Report, you take a moment and you stand back, and you know that there are going to be the conspiracy theories that are going to start popping up over all of this. And it's just one of those things that happens in the modern world, especially now that we have the internet and you can move these things along at lightning speed, these various theories. I'd be interested to hear. I know that we have some people out there who do a lot more research in this than I do. I'd be interested to hear this morning in the next few minutes if anyone has if they can counter that theory, or if they think it could be something else, or if any claim of cholera is just a smokescreen. And of course, you can reach us on Top Story at News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as newsradio1310.com, where you can hear us anywhere around the world. You can reach us by dialing 736-0300. 736-0300. 45 at our studios right now. It's 8:13. My name is Bill Colley, and I am the host of the program. Also, as I mentioned earlier, coming up, Steve Millington will be talking about some state issues with us, as well as the fact that we have a congressman who's a little perturbed with some people who might normally, well, it's a stretch, might normally support him. And that's coming along in a few minutes. I also will mention, if I get a chance before we wrap up the program today, maybe I'll do it right now as well, there is a story out of the Salt Lake Tribune today. Did you know that Mitt Romney is going to be stepping into a boxing ring? True story. True story. And he's going to be stepping into the ring against Evander Holyfield. Romney is 68 years old. Now, he's already joking that he's going to get himself knocked out. But it's actually for a very, very good cause. So from the bad news to the good news, as quickly as we can, I guess, transition here this morning. This is from a column by Paul Rowley with the Salt Lake Tribune. Romney is slated to fight former heavyweight boxing champion Evander Holyfield in the marquee event during a several-bout evening at the Rail Event Center near the Pacific Union Depot in Salt Lake City on May 15th. Now, they're not doing this because of any animosity. It's not like Evander Holyfield, during the campaign in 2012, was working for Barack Obama and got into a nasty spat with Mitt Romney, and now they're going to go out and settle it. It has nothing to do with it. In fact, my guess is they'll dance around a lot and just kind of push gloves in each other's faces. Holyfield agreed to participate in a fundraising event for Charity Vision, a humanitarian organization founded about 20 years ago by retired Salt Lake physician Bill Jackson, who was a mission president in the Philippines for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, saw the suffering in areas with abject poverty and the total lack of medical care. So Evander Holyfield, who, from whatever I've read about him in the past, is a really nice guy. Evander Holyfield is going to jump into the ring with the former presidential candidate and former governor of Massachusetts. And as I say, it'll be somewhat of a faux fight, but it is to help bring people into the building. There are several other cards that are actually on booked that night. So this is going to be the big event that brings people in. And then when Mitt Romney and Evander Holyfield step out of the ring, then you're going to have other people coming in who will actually be looking to bloody each other for charity. So, yeah, get your head beat in for charity. So Mitt Romney will not have to worry about that. Knowing him, he'll walk into the ring with every hair in place. Have you ever seen him otherwise? And he'll probably walk out of the ring with every hair in place. And Evander Holyfield doesn't have to worry about that because he shaved his head some time ago. So no one's going to get messed up while they're actually doing this fundraising event for charity. So I got a second. I wanted to mention that this morning as well because we're going to get very busy here in a few minutes. Guest heavy today, and that means I don't have a lot of time to go through my usual, Limbaugh calls it his colossal stack of stuff. I've got to come up with a name of my own. But I wanted to at least mention a couple of those things early on. We may not get to them tomorrow. Now, it could well be that they could make some other determination on the snow geese, and by tomorrow we could have a lot more to talk about. but I think the government is likely going to stick with the cholera story, especially once you actually have seen it happen in some places before in the last few years. It likely makes some sense. A couple of other quick notes. We've got some folks who do a very, very good job of supporting this radio show, and I'd like to give them a quick mention if I could. First of all, our good friends at Western States Bus Services are hiring part-time bus drivers right now, split shifts, 5 days per week. Summer's off and scheduled no school days. That means when it snows really, really heavily, which we haven't seen a lot of lately, and we probably won't see a lot of between now and spring. Spring officially arriving this coming Friday, right? 5 days per week, summer's off, scheduled no school days, pay is $10.75 per hour. You can apply today by contacting 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. And also, we have some guests coming by tomorrow. We have a very special event between 8:30 and 9 o'clock right here on the radio on Wednesday mornings. The doctor will be in, and oftentimes he brings along an assistant or somebody from the nursing side. And when was the last time that you had a chance to ask a friend for medical advice? Often when you need medical advice, it's going to cost you a little bit more money. Well, not tomorrow morning. My friends at Tripp Family Medicine are going to be live with me. They're here each Wednesday morning during Top Story, and we'll be discussing issues important to you and give you an opportunity to call in with your questions. Now, the topic mainly tomorrow, and we can move around a little bit on this, but mainly the topic tomorrow is weight loss and some new evidence and new theories about how to go about that, and it may not be quite so much a challenge for you with some of the new practices in medicine. And it's not just a willpower thing. Some people actually have some difficulty losing weight. Trust me, I'm one of them. But what we're going to do is talk to the doctors about some new science that may make this actually easier on you. And you can call in, check in with the doctor tomorrow, and get some questions answered by tuning in Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. And we'll be here until 9 o'clock with the doctor tomorrow morning. Keep in mind, the good folks at Tripp Family Medicine are located right here in Twin Falls. In fact, they're on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, in fact, we may get to him a little early today, simply because he's had the time to get into the studio a little early. Steve Millington going to be talking with us. We're down to about 10 days, technically, left in session, but it may extend beyond that, state legislative session. So there's a lot to talk about. And a lot of people wondering what we're going to see. A lot of promises and a lot of hopes that were around at the beginning of this session seem to have faded away somewhat quickly, and seems to be the nature of politics when people start saying, what's that going to cost? And as soon as you get that sticker shock, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that was a great idea. We all know that in our own personal lives. You may see a beautiful car on the lot, you go to look at it, and then you take a look at the sticker and, oh, well, wait a minute. I'll think about that another day. It's 8:19. We have a check of just quickly temperature. It's 45 at our studios. 8:20 this morning. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com means you can carry us anywhere around the world. By the way, every once in a while, Steve Millington gets here early. Well, he's an early riser anyway. That's if you're going to be in the political game, you want to stay ahead of everyone else. So what are you up about 4:30, 5 o'clock most mornings?
By 5:30, we're up and going.
I was going to say, this morning was 4 o'clock for me. Yesterday was 3, but there was no rhyme or reason to that. I just woke up at 3 and decided to stay up.
That's not in my DNA.
Yeah.
But the 5:30 time is that's great. I love seeing sunrises.
I did afternoon radio for about 7 years, and I was on at 3 p.m. and I wouldn't get to the office until about 12:30. Wasn't scheduled to be there until about 1, but I would wander in, and I'd still get up, though, in the morning at 6 o'clock. And I'd go to the diner, visit with friends, and have my coffee and my breakfast, and then go to the post office, or if I needed to go to the pharmacy and do all of those things. Mm-hmm. And finally, I'd wander into work. But I was always up early. And then when I did morning radio again, I never got out of the habit of getting up early. I was getting up at 3 o'clock, and then I left morning radio, not quite a year and a half ago, went back to afternoon radio, and then went into, working on political campaigns. And I still was on that morning radio schedule. Nothing's changed.
Well, I'm a want-to-be country boy. So we have a little acreage out in the country, and it's just more comfortable for me to get up in the morning and run out and check what little bit of water I have to change and fuss around a few minutes and feed the few calves that I have. And I just do that early in fact, I try to get that all done before I go back in the house to have my own breakfast.
No, he would probably find people who would argue with him, but my best friend is a dairy farmer, and he said that as he's getting older and his knees get sore, and that he's not quite the young man that he used to be. He said he's going to get rid of the dairy herd and go to beef cattle because he thinks being a beef farmer is easy. But beef farmers, I'm sure, would object to that.
I think there'd be a great argumentation there.
It's 8:26. Steve Millington in the studio with us on Top Story with Bill Colley this morning. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com online. 44 at our studios right now. We have a lot to talk about simply because the deadline for a state legislative session is 10 days away, but they're not going to make it.
There's a part of me that agrees with that statement that's unlikely, but there's another part of me that says as of this past weekend, the Speaker and the President Pro Tem of the Senate both are committed to shutting the doors next, they say Friday, but it could extend into Saturday. But they want to be done 10 days from now. And there's an awful lot of work to be done. They are, and the thing that's interesting is everybody procrastinates.
Yes.
And so we get all of this goofy stuff showing up at the last minute. And so there's a rush to go over some of this stuff. And that's bothersome to me because they hold off on these things till the last minute. And sometimes these items are a little bit more broad or wide-ranging than just, oh, yeah, by the way, let's do this. They require some attention and some time and some discussion, and bringing it into the last minute, they don't get it. And so sometimes we get some really bad stuff floating around simply because nobody wants to vet it earlier in the session. So the next 10 days are going to be interesting as all get out to see how much stuff shows up.
There were so many, at the beginning of session, so many grand plans about road bills and teacher raises, and we're not seeing perhaps any of that coming this session.
I think we're going to see a lot of movement on the education side. The transportation thing, that's going to be a little bit tougher to get handled. However, in conversations with folks, they kind of tell me that we could see maybe 5 to 8 cents in gas tax increases, and maybe a dime to 12 cents on diesel tax increases, and some small increase in registration fees to go to the transportation people. But keep in mind, a 1 cent increase in gas taxes amounts to just shy of $10 million a year. So if we wanted a $200 million for transportation, that's a 20-cent increase in gas taxes.
You couldn't survive politically by doing that.
Never going to happen. Ain't even on the page.
Right.
However, a dime would get us $100 million. That's about half of what they're looking for. I don't think that 10 cents increase has a snowball's chance on a hot August day, but I think maybe somewhere between 5 and 8 cents will probably survive. The difficult part about this is that the people who are kind of dragging their feet on this whole thing, they now want to begin to cannibalize the general fund. And in Idaho, there has been a kind of a strict definition that general fund monies do not end up in transportation, and vice versa. And now we've got a lot of folks who say we will only agree to the gas tax increase if we can begin to tap into the general fund money to support transportation costs. Now, that gives me a great deal of concern, anguish.
Hold on to that thought for a minute. Steve Millington in studio with us until 9 o'clock this morning. It's coming up on 8:30. 44 at our studios. This is Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley. We've got a lot more to talk about as well. And Steve obviously knows Mike Simpson better than I do. We've got a couple of thoughts about that coming up too as well. I want to mention something very, very quickly. We had a guest here yesterday from the Twin Falls Senior Center, Jeanette Rowe, and she was talking about some events that are going on, fundraising events. They actually have something called the Pottery Crawl and Fundraiser taking place today from 2 to 5 p.m. This is involving St. Patrick's Day, and you can paint and decorate a beer stein, wine glass, or a solo cup. You've got to bring your own beer. That will not be supplied. probably a good idea. Food available and prizes will be up for grabs. And so they're looking forward to seeing you at the Twin Falls Senior Center today between 2 and 5. Also, Mayor Don Hall is going to be out working, I think, today with the Meals on Wheels people. And that'll keep him busy. Plus, here's the thing. It's 8:34 at our studios, 44 degrees. Steve Millington may agree with me on this. If you're Mayor Hall and you're going out delivering Meals on Wheels, this is a sacrifice, because there are going to be a great many people who may say, as long as you're here, I want to talk to you about... Could slow down delivery.
Yeah, right. I think, number one, kudos to Mayor Hall for participating in that kind of event, but he does open a big door. Can I tell you about my taxes? We don't have any police and fire protection here. How come we don't? Whoa.
Here's your lunch. Got to go. 8:35 now, and if you'd like to chat with us this morning on Top Story, I'll give you a telephone number, 736-0300. That is 736-0300. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Steve Millington, our guest, until 9 o'clock this morning. And my name is Bill Colley. And Steve, we've got a couple of people. It never fails when you're here, the phones ring.
Well, that's good. That's what we want.
You're on the air. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Idaho is supposed to be a Republican state. That's what I've heard since I have moved here. But they do a lot of Democrat stuff, like raising gas taxes, and Mike Simpson's not really a Republican, so I don't understand this.
That's an interesting question, and people say or ask me the question, okay, Millington, why are you so much in favor of raising gas taxes? And I say to them, government falls into one of two categories. I'm going to go back and start this over. They fall into one of two categories. There is the thing that I call government responsibilities, and then there's the thing that I refer to as government overreach. And transportation costs are one of the things that I refer to as government responsibilities, as is education. Now, government overreach is when they start telling me what clothes to wear, what car to drive, which side of the highway to be on, blah, blah, blah. So when we talk about responsibilities, one of the things we have to do in the state of Idaho is provide for a reasonable infrastructure for transportation movement. Now, just this past weekend, I was doing some traveling, and I went past a little construction project, and there was about 4 state trucks parked there, and they were working, I think it was on a guardrail. And as I slowed down because the flashing lights and everything, and so you don't want to be going too fast through. And I kind of rubbernecked and looked over and watched. And as usual, there's one guy doing the work and 3 or 4 guys holding shovels. And I thought to myself, at least act like you're doing something. Don't stand there and lean on the stupid shovel. So I understand a lot of consternation on the part of people who say, how come we have to keep raising taxes? 2 things. We got to pay for transportation, and we got to pay for education. We also have to take care of criminal justice. That's prisons and incarceration and that kind of stuff. We can't avoid that.
And at the federal level, it's obviously you've got to, the main mission is defending people.
That's right.
Providing for the defense.
Common defense. That's
right. And at the state level, you want to keep the roads open because roads mean good business. You got to get the trucks going back and forth with the goods.
We need to understand in Idaho, our agriculture is one of our, it's not the leading, but it's a major player in Idaho's economy. And we can't consume all of that stuff in Idaho. We have to export it to other surrounding areas. And in order to do that, we have to have good roads. And that costs money. And I'm sorry about that. It just costs money. I don't like it any better than anybody else. That one I can kind of make a case for. Education is another one I can make a case for. So we get into the legislature. Early on, they were looking at 10 cents a gallon. That has basically been pared down to where we think if we get 8 cents, it'll be a miracle. I think the number's closer to 5 or 6.
Yeah, 5. I was thinking 5.
Which is only going to give us about $50-60 million a year of additional tax revenues for transportation. I had a conversation over the weekend, and I said, all we would have to do in the state of Idaho is have one of our bridge structures collapse. Just one. have them collapse. And then all of a sudden, people would just go ballistic. There would be lawsuits piled up in every direction from every bleeding heart attorney that you can get your hands on, just to be nuisance. And so all of a sudden, when that happened, then if it happened, I hope it never does, but if something like that happened, we would not be quite so concerned about how high our gas taxes were, because then we would say, okay, state, we gave you the money, now fix some of these problems.
We've got more coming up with Steve Millington, and more people obviously would like to talk to you this morning.
Good, let's take them.
It's like throwing kerosene on the fire. 8:40, 44 degrees at Top Story with Bill Colley. Steve Millington, our guest until 9. This is News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our guest in the studio, Steve Millington, he's the chairman of the Twin Falls County Republican Party, and joins us on Tuesday mornings. It feels like Monday sometimes.
My, how time flies.
You know what? And guess what day it is? I know what today is. It's a Tuesday, but it's the 17th of March, which is a holy day for some of us. But some of us will not have a problem with that.
You are Irish, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you are Irish. You told me that once before. Holy cow. I should be more respectful.
Do you realize
today.
One of my distant relatives in Ireland, there's actually it was a few years ago, it was issued, and Colley. It was called the Colley Report. And it opened the door for civil unions and same-sex marriages in Ireland. And I thought, I've got to be related to that.
My goodness. So much for your conservative standing, Bill.
8:44, well, I won't see her at the family reunion.
Yeah.
8:44, 45 our temperature. You're listening to Top Story. Bill Colley with you, and Steve Millington, our guest. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Before we get to the phones, and I know people want to talk to you, but Mike Simpson seems to be a real lightning rod, especially with this listening audience. Now, as Randy Staple has said yesterday, he always manages to win a primary challenge and then a general election, but it would appear that his constituency is far more conservative than he is, and he's running out of patience with conservatives.
I find that interesting that he would make that statement, that he's running out of patience with conservatives. He needs to remember who it is he works for. And the 2nd Congressional District in Idaho cuts off part of the Boise city area and then picks up everything east, clear to Wyoming. And that's a pretty conservative bunch of people. And he might want to be a little bit more cautious about throwing the conservatives off the bus, because they are his constituency. And in fact, I heard comment made from the people over in Madison County, that's Rexburg. In the 2012 elections, they had the highest Republican vote of any county in the United States. And so they're a conservative bunch over there. And the guy might want to be real careful about throwing too many rotten eggs at the conservatives, because that chicken will come home to roost, and it's only going to be another year and a half away.
He's defending, though, his boss. He's become part of that inner circle with John Boehner.
He is. He does have a very significant responsibility to Boehner, Speaker of the House, but his first responsibility is Idaho. And I'm sorry that many of the folks back there in the House of Representatives don't line up quite as conservative as we are here. But Simpson, you work for us. You don't work for those guys back there. Sometimes those guys go back to Washington, D.C., and they start drinking that Kool-Aid back there, that water. And I think what we need to do is take up a collection and send them a case of bottled water every day, Idaho water every day, so that we can keep them on track. Because they go back there and start drinking that Washington water, and it screws up their thinking.
Send them a case of Olympia. At least it'll keep them running back and forth to the men's room. They'll miss all the
votes.
8:47. We have a caller with us. You're on the air with Steve Millington, our guest today on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning.
Did we lose that one? May have. Let's try our next caller then. My telephone here has gotten the attitude. The buttons will push, but they don't always engage. You're on the air. Good morning.
Yeah, today, election Israel. Last week, or when Netanyahu spoke to the joint session of Congress, Obama said, well, I didn't have time to listen. He was on a teleconference with somebody, and he says it wouldn't be right to interfere or be patronizing one way or another an elected official from another country. In other words, but while he's saying that, they're over there literally, campaigning for Herzog against Netanyahu. I mean, the unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, Steve, about all this is Netanyahu, who was raised in Pennsylvania, unfortunately not born there, so he can't be our president. I sometimes think he's more of an American than our president.
Than we give him credit for. I think it's a considerable snub to take a leader of any other country and not give them their due respect. If they're going to speak to the Congress, I don't care who invited them. You show up, you sit and listen to the speech, applaud graciously, and go home. But you don't just avoid them and snub them. And then all of these news reports coming out now that they're funneling all kind of money through various entities and impossible to trace kind of stuff to assist in Netanyahu's challengers. Herzog, is that his name?
Yeah.
That's absolutely ludicrous.
I just wonder if maybe they had to go to the Clinton Foundation.
I'm sure that's where they went, was the Clinton Foundation, and send the money to. And I'm kind of a pro-Israel fan. I just really think that we do ourselves a horrible disservice by trying to cut off that. They're the one entity in the Middle East that keeps all of the various factions divided over there. And if Israel were gone and all of those guys united together, yeah, right.
849, Steve Millington, our guest in studio. We have another caller with us on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You're up next.
Good morning. My deal is with Simpson, and for years I've been battling Simpson with snowmobile clubs over the Boulder White Clouds and everything else. I do not consider him a conservative. I voted against him in the last election. I tried to get the word out, everything else. He's another one of those guys that tells you what you want to hear to get in and then does something else. And I'm getting sick and tired of this because all these guys go in. Steve, how many people up there swear allegiance to the Constitution?
Every one of them.
But does it say I'm going to try to uphold the Constitution, or am I going to try to only obey the things I like? No.
No, it doesn't. You're right. That the oath of office says, I will. And I think that's an action verb. I will. Not sometimes I will, or once in a while, or only if nobody's looking. It says, I will. And many of them forget that the minute that they get done with their oath of office and the... It's just sometimes very frustrating.
I got two words for Mike Simpson, and that is Mike Castle. I was in Delaware in 2010 when Castle was forced from office. In fact, I organized. There's a book called The Backlash, written by I think it's a Daily Beast columnist. And my sister jokes the first chapter is about me. I organized people to go to one of his town halls, and 300 people showed up and harangued him, and it was the beginning of the end. And his margins of victory were getting less and less and less every year. When he finally got a primary challenger who had some juice behind her, she managed to take him out.
That's right. And Simpson had a really strong primary challenger in 2012. And this kinds of actions that we're seeing and hearing now is just going to embolden some of these people. And he could find himself with a very strong, serious challenge in 2016. And the caller mentioned Boulder White Clouds. We do not need a national monument in Boulder White Clouds. It's already covered under all kinds of federal protections. And any time that the government steps forward with something like a national monument thing, the next thing you have is regulations and requirements that are absolutely prohibitive for every single person who ever wants to go there. And you find yourself... Nobody can even walk through the stupid forest, let alone go camping in there or take a four-wheeler ride or go fishing in the stream or whatever. They just cut it back to where you can't even do anything.
I think we have another caller with us.
Okay, let's take him.
You're on the air at 8:50. We'll call it 8:53 at News Radio 1310 KLIX.
I find it ironic that Simpson keeps violating his oath of office and spending for all of these unconstitutional things that aren't covered in Article 1, Section 8, and also all of, the revenue bills are supposed to start in the Congress, and yet he just voted for fully funding Obama's unconstitutional executive amnesty, which really should rile everybody up. At the same time, the state of Idaho is trying to push forward through a Russian roulette type situation to call for a constitutional convention. The real problem is not the Constitution. We need to eliminate people like Simpson that are violating their oaths of office every day and spending all of this money and for these unbalanced budgets.
That you make a very strong and very valid point. Number one, I agree that a constitutional convention could be a real wreck. When somebody can tell me unequivocally that they can control the agenda, and more specifically, who is going to participate, who are the delegates to that constitutional convention, I will listen to them. Until then, our caller is right on. We need to have people who will go back there and read that Constitution, and when they say, I will uphold that Constitution, for crying out loud, do exactly that. Quit giving us a two-bit piece of stuff. And we had the House of Representatives had a perfect chance to slam the door on all this executive order stuff and the runaway process that the executive branch of government has taken upon itself in the last 6 years. They could have slammed the door on that and said, you're done, no more. Congress authorizes the House of Representatives, I said that wrong. The House of Representatives authorizes all spending issues. And then the Senate their original intent was to advise and give consent to the House of Representatives. So we'll do it in the House of Representatives. The Senate will consent and send it to the executive branch to be fulfilled, and not the other way around. And they had a perfect chance to slam the door on that two-bit mischief, and they didn't do it. And it really ticks me off. Sometimes these politicians have got to find that they got to put on their big boy pants and get in the cockeyed ball game. Never mind sitting in the far outside bleachers and hoping that nobody's watching.
We got about 90 seconds.
Ooh, I'm fired up.
I wouldn't notice. I got about 90 seconds. We have a caller with us.
Okay, let's listen to him.
You're on the air.
Let's get you fired up even more when it comes to the road deal.
Yeah.
You talked about them wanting to get into the general fund.
Oh, big mistake.
And if they unlock that box, I got one word for you: Social Security.
We didn't get a chance to talk about that, so I'll try to talk real fast for a minute. The general fund is sacrosanct. It is used for education, for health and welfare, for criminal justice, and all other state administration. Education gets about 62 to 63%, and that's clear through the university level. Health and welfare gets about 15 to 18. Criminal justice gets about 12 to 15, and state government gets about 6 to 8. If we open the door and start taking the money out of general fund and giving it to transportation, which one of those entities are we going to cut off? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fight tooth and nail to keep the education budget in place. Now, they're adding $100 million to the education budget in this year's proposed budget, and that's in keeping with the Otter's 20-point plan, and it gives the teachers a real boost. That the devil's in the details, and they don't have this worked out yet, but the career ladder portion of that education budget is about $32 million that they're going to put back into career ladder adjustments for teachers. Utah, our neighbors to the south, passed a bill in their deal that science and math teachers are eligible for up to $5,000 to $10,000 bonuses. Now, if I'm a kid graduating from university level and I've got a degree in education, I'm going to teach science, chemistry, or physics, or math, or one of those things. Am I going to stay in Idaho, or am I going to go to Utah? Pretty soon, all the good teachers in Utah and our education suffers something terrible. We can't afford to run the risk of jeopardizing our general fund budget. Let's raise the stupid gas tax. I hate it with a passion, but we got to pay for the dang roads. The freeways look good. Go drive some of these county roads and some of these back roads. That's where you're going to see things falling apart. And they get their money from the state transportation department. 40% of the state transportation money ends up in the local highway districts, cities, or in Twin Falls County. That'd be West End, Filer, and Twin Falls Highway District. And they take care of these roads that we drive on every day of the week. And we cannot let that fall apart. But you start stealing from the general fund, and our caller is spot on. Next thing you know, transportation department owns the general fund, and what happens to education and health and welfare and criminal justice?
Gone.